What happens when the richest, meanest man in the village suddenly loses his most prized possession in the dead night? Watch this powerful story of Chief Obi, his shiny red car, and a sudden twist of karma that will teach you a lesson you'll never forget. Once upon a time, in a very peaceful and sunny Nigerian village called Umuofia, there lived a very proud and boastful man named Chief Obi, who believed he was the most important person in the whole wide world because he had a lot of money. The village of Umuofia was a lovely place filled with hardworking people like Papa Namdi and Mama Ngozi, who grew big tasty yams and sweet green vegetables in their gardens to feed their children, but they did not have a lot of money to buy fancy things. Chief Obi was the only person in the entire village who had enough money to buy a motor vehicle, and he made sure that every single person in the village knew about it every single day. Chief Obi had traveled to the big busy city to buy a giant, shiny, bright red car with wheels that sparkled like stars in the night sky and a horn that honked so loudly it sounded like a roaring lion. When he brought the shiny red car back to the quiet village of Umuofia, all the little children and the older people stopped what they were doing to look at the giant machine because they had never seen anything so beautiful and expensive in their whole lives. Instead of being a kind neighbor and sharing his joy or giving the tired farmers a ride home from their dusty farms, Chief Obi decided to use his shiny red car to make everyone else feel very small and very poor. Every single afternoon, when the sun was shining its brightest and the dirt roads of the village were very dry and covered in loose brown sand, Chief Obi would step out of his gigantic house wearing his expensive clothes to start the loud engine of his red car. As the hard-working villagers worked on the sides of the road carrying heavy baskets of yams and big pots of water on their heads, Chief Obi would push his foot down on the pedal to make the car drive as fast as a cheetah running through the wild jungle. Because he drove so incredibly fast on the dirt roads, the heavy tires of the red car would kick up a massive cloud of thick brown dust that flew all over the air and covered the poor villagers from their heads all the way down to their toes. While the sweet village children like little Chike and young Amaka were coughing and wiping the dirty brown dust out of their sensitive eyes, Chief Obi would roll down the shiny glass window of his red car to laugh a very loud and mean laugh at them. He would point his finger at the dusty villagers and shout that they were completely useless and poor because they had nothing on this earth, while he was the luckiest and greatest man alive to own such a magnificent driving machine. He constantly reminded Papa Namdi and Mama Ngozi that they would never ever get richer than him in 100 years, leaving the poor villagers feeling very sad and disrespected as they watched the glowing red lights of his car disappear down the dusty road. After a very long day of driving up and down the dirt roads to make the poor villagers feel terrible about themselves, the bright golden sun slowly began to set behind the tall green palm trees of Umuofia village, painting the evening sky in beautiful shades of orange and purple. Chief Obi proudly drove his giant red car back into his massive compound and parked it right in the middle of his big yard so that anyone walking past his tall iron gates could clearly see the shiny metal reflecting the light of the silvery moon that was just waking up in the night sky. He then walked into his gigantic house with a huge, arrogant smile on his face, rubbing his full tummy after eating a massive plate of delicious jollof rice and talking loudly to himself about how he was the smartest and most powerful man in the entire world simply because he owned the only motor vehicle in the village. He did not care that poor Papa Namdi and sweet Mama Ngozi were sleeping in their small huts with very little food in their stomachs, because Chief Obi only cared about his beautiful car and how much better it made him feel compared to everyone else who had to walk on their own 2 feet. While Chief Obi was comfortably wrapped in his expensive blankets and snoring so loudly in his soft bed that the walls shook, the whole village of Umuofia became incredibly quiet as all the hard-working farmers and their tired children went to deep sleep to rest their bodies for the next day of farming. The night was extremely dark and very silent, with the only sounds coming from the tiny chirping crickets hiding in the tall wet grass and the wise hooting owls sitting high up in the leafy branches of the ancient baobab trees that watched over the sleepy village. Suddenly, while the bright moon completely hid itself behind a very thick and dark gray cloud, a group of very sneaky and quiet thieves wearing black clothes crept out of the dark forest and tiptoed very carefully towards Chief Obi's big compound without making even the tiniest little sound with their feet. When we boast and show off the things we have to make other people feel jealous, we only attract the wrong kind of attention. So it is always much safer and wiser to be humble and protect what we have instead of bragging about it to the whole world. These clever thieves had been watching the proud man from far away for many days, and they knew exactly where Chief Obi kept his precious car, because he was always boasting about it and leaving it out in the open yard for the whole world to look at. The sneaky thieves slowly reached out with their strong hands and pushed the heavy iron gates open with extreme care, making absolutely sure that the rusty metal hinges did not squeak or make any loud noise that could wake up the sleeping village or the snoring Chief Obi. Instead of using the shiny metal keys to start the loud roaring engine that sounded like a hungry lion and would surely wake up everyone in the neighborhood, the smart thieves gently put their hands on the back of the heavy red car and pushed it with all of their combined strength over the dirt path. They quietly rolled the beautiful red car right out of the big gates and into the deep, dark shadows of the night, pushing it further and further down the dusty road and far away from the quiet village of Umuofia until it could no longer be seen by anyone. Chief Obi's grand compound was left completely empty and bare under the starry night sky, while the proud and boastful man just continued to sleep peacefully in his warm room, completely unaware that the shiny toy he loved more than his own neighbors was disappearing into the darkness forever, and that he would wake up to a very big surprise when the bright golden sun finally began to rise high above the lush green hills of Umuofia village, and the noisy morning roosters started crowing loudly to wake everyone up for a new day of hard work. Chief Obi slowly opened his eyes and stretched his arms happily in his very soft and comfortable bed. He climbed out of his warm blankets, feeling incredibly excited because he could not wait to go outside and look at his beautiful shiny red car so he could plan exactly which dusty dirt roads he would drive down today to show off and splash dry sand on his hard-working neighbors. Walking out of his bedroom wearing his finest and most expensive silk clothes, Chief Obi stepped proudly into his big outdoor compound with a giant smile on his face. But he suddenly stopped completely still as his eyes grew as wide as large drinking cups, because the exact spot where he had parked his magnificent red car was completely empty, except for a few tire marks left in the brown dirt. At first, the normally boastful man rubbed his eyes very hard with his hands because he thought he was still having a silly dream and that his giant shiny toy would magically appear if he just looked closely enough. But no matter how many times he blinked and stared at the empty space, the beautiful red car was absolutely nowhere to be found in the entire yard. When he finally realized that the sneaky thieves from the dark night had successfully crept into his home and pushed his most precious possession far away into the shadows where he could never find it, Chief Obi threw his hands high up into the air and began to cry with massive heavy tears rolling down his cheeks like a pouring rainstorm. He wailed and shouted so incredibly loudly that his sad cries echoed all the way down the quiet village paths and alerted all the families, including little children like young Amaka and little Chike, who were just getting ready to eat their morning breakfast of sweet yams and warm porridge with their parents. As Chief Obi threw himself onto the dusty ground and continued weeping bitterly about his stolen shiny machine, his tummy suddenly let out a very loud and rumbling growl because he had not eaten anything since the night before, which made him quickly remember a very terrible secret that he had been hiding from the entire village of Umuofia. He realized with great sadness and a heavy heart that he had spent every single penny he owned in the whole world just to buy that expensive red car and the fancy clothes he wore to show off, meaning that his gigantic beautiful house had absolutely no food hiding in the kitchen cabinets, and he did not even have one tiny coin left in his pockets to buy a simple cup of gari or a bunch of sweet bananas from the village market. The very proud man who used to boldly mock the tired farmers and cruelly call them poor was now sitting completely alone in his empty compound, with a very hungry stomach and no friends to help him, crying endlessly because his giant shiny toy was gone forever and he had absolutely nothing left on the earth to feed himself or make him feel important anymore. Wiping the heavy tears from his swollen eyes and holding his loudly rumbling tummy with both of his shaking hands, Chief Obi slowly stood up from the dusty ground of his empty compound because he knew that crying for 100 years would never bring his shiny red car back or put delicious warm food into his desperately empty belly. He realized that he had absolutely no other choice but to walk down the very same dirt roads where he used to drive his noisy motor vehicles so fast, hoping he could go to the busy village square to beg the hard-working farmers for a small job just to earn enough little coins to buy a single piece of sweet roasted yam. As he dragged his tired and heavy feet along the long winding path, while feeling completely embarrassed and deeply ashamed of his terrible past behavior, he finally arrived at the lively village center where Papa Namdi was busy arranging his massive harvest and sweet Mama Ngozi was happily selling her fresh green vegetables to the other friendly neighbors. Taking a very deep breath to gather whatever tiny bit of courage he still had left inside his deeply saddened heart, Chief Obi walked up to the smiling farmers with his head bowed down very low in complete shame to softly ask if they had any heavy baskets he could carry or dirty weeds he could pull from their gardens just to get a little bit of food to stop his terrible hunger. When the surprised villagers saw the once proud and boastful man standing before them, wearing his dusty clothes and looking completely defeated by the world, they completely stopped what they were doing and looked at him very closely to understand why the loudest and meanest man in Umuofia was suddenly speaking in such a quiet and polite voice like a shy little mouse. Papa Namdi gently put down his heavy farming tools and looked directly into Chief Obi's tearful eyes to calmly remind him of the very mean and hurtful words he used to shout out of his moving window, asking the humbled man exactly where his magnificent shiny toy was today, and reminding him how he had cruelly promised that the simple villagers would never ever become richer or happier than him. Hearing those completely true but incredibly painful words from the honest farmer made Chief Obi realize exactly how terribly he had treated the wonderful and hardworking people around him, causing him to drop down to his knees right there in the dusty village square to apologize with all of his broken heart for being so incredibly foolish, completely arrogant, and very unkind to the people who were actually his true friends, because the sweet people of Umuofia village had very big and forgiving hearts that were always filled with genuine love and wonderful kindness for everyone. Mama Ngozi smiled gently and handed the crying man a large bowl of warm sweet porridge, while Papa Namdi offered him a sturdy farming hoe so he could work. From that beautiful sunny day forward, Chief Obi happily worked side by side with little Chike, young Amaka, and all the villagers in the green fields, finally learning the absolute most important lesson in the whole wide world, that true happiness and real wealth are never ever found in shiny metal cars, but in the warm friendships and caring community you build around yourself. Thank you for watching. Remember, true wealth is never found in shiny things, but how kindly you treat the people around us. If you enjoyed this lesson on humanity, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories. See you in the next video.